All right, well, we'll get started. Welcome everyone to today's session around the new usage dashboard in the Palace system. My name is Carissa Egan. If you haven't interacted with me, I know I've seen a lot of really familiar names. So hello, everyone. I'm joined by my colleagues who I'm sure you all have interacted with as well. Tara Carpenter, the implementation manager, and Jill Scarson, the partner success lead on the Palace project. I'm sure we're the trio that you've interacted with the most over the time using Palace, and we're happy to have you all here today with us. Um, if you've sat in a session with me before, you know that I'm super informal. So please don't hesitate to jump in with questions in the chat, to raise your hand if you'd like to vocalize that question as we're going today. I have a couple slides, kind of set the stage. I have a live demo. Hands up to the universe that our live demo goes well. It's always a risk. And then I timed myself earlier and I've left about a half an hour for questions in our kind of hour block. So we should have plenty of time to kind of deep dive and go off in any directions that you all are interested in pursuing. Because this session is for you. I want it to be catered to the information that you are all most interested in. So, like I said, I've got about a half an hour worth of stuff to walk through, and then we can kind of take questions as we go or questions at the end. Um, the slides, as I mentioned, the link to the recording, all the links, everything that I'm showing will share out to everybody. After today's session, we get a chance to kind of post-process it and get it posted. So don't hesitate or don't feel like you need to jot down anything unless you want to while I'm chatting. Looking at my notes here over at the side of my screen, make sure I didn't forget anything. I think we're good. So with that, I'm going to jump in. Like I mentioned, feel free to jump in with questions. While I'm sharing my screen here, I don't well, actually, no, I can pull the chat up, I think. There we go. I can see the chat. And Tara and Jill will be monitoring, I know, for me as well. All right, so I've gone through the agenda. I'm going to just do a couple, very few slides, and then we'll jump into the heart, which is the live demo. As I mentioned, please don't hesitate to insert questions into the chat. As I'm showing things, if you want me to kind of deep dive into something or repeat or clarify, I don't take myself too seriously, so please don't hesitate and don't feel like you're going to interrupt. Okay, so the usage dashboard that we recently launched and then relaunched, updated in Palace, is kind of underpinned by core usage events that we're tracking. So I wanted to start with just kind of talking through the events or the actions that we are currently tracking and that we can report on to kind of set the foundation for the visuals that are then displayed in the usage dashboard. Because that was important to kind of talk through what we are capturing and what we can report on in today's discussion. So as of today, there are 6, I didn't count them beforehand, main usage events that we are tracking. And they are, when I say usage events, I mean actions that your patrons or users or customers, community, I know different libraries have different terminology for the folks that they're serving, are doing in the Palace app itself. So buttons that they're clicking, actions that they're taking, we are capturing that information. So to kind of
Yes, thank you.
talk through those, the first thing that the first action that we're capturing is a checkout. So in the app, in the Palace app, patrons clicking the Get button, so to check out a title, or to return the title is a check-in, to place a hold, of course, to release a hold, which is canceling that hold request, to fulfill a title, which is to download. So after you've checked out a title in Palace, the Get button turns into the download button. That is the fulfillment kind of mechanism that we're tracking. And you might imagine that for an individual who is reading a book on multiple devices, they might have one checkout event, but have multiple fulfillments. They might be downloading it on their iOS device, their iPhone, and then maybe on their iPad later, et cetera. So they could have multiple fulfillment actions tied to one checkout. And then similarly, we track open book events. So every time a patron then also opens a book, you get an event that is tracked in our system as well. So for one checkout, you might have multiple fulfillments or downloads, and then for each download, you'll have multiple open book events, presumably, unless you have a lot of patrons who are reading a book end to end or listening end to end in kind of one session. So today, those are the core events that we're tracking. In the future, I'm sure we will add additional events, but I wanted to be kind of clear in terms of those are kind of the structural things that we're doing today. Um, and then for each event, we're capturing specific metadata elements. So these are the things that allow us to then slice and dice and make the visuals that we're about to dig into. So for every single event, we're tracking the time that the patron clicked that button or that event is logged. And the event itself, was it a checkout? Was it a hold? Was it a hold cancellation, et cetera? And then the additional elements of the library that the patron is using in the Palace app, the library's short name. In our case, for all public libraries, we're using the IMLS FSCS ID number, so you'll see that in your data. The collection name that the title is a part of, as well as the distributor. So you might have for instance, a statewide Baker and Taylor collection as well as a local Baker and Taylor collection. So both of those would have Baker and Taylor as the distributor, but you could parse out usage by the collection name. So a critical way to discern usage there. And then, of course, information about the title that the action was taken upon itself that you would expect to have. The title of the book, the author, its identifier, the publisher, the genre of the book, the audience that the book is intended for, the medium or format, the language, whether it's fiction or nonfiction, license information if we have it, as well as if it's open access or not. Most of that metadata is coming from the distributor, and that is usually upstream of us. And then further upstream is the publisher who provides that metadata to the distributor. So if you all are not familiar kind of with that chain of events or that flow of metadata. So that is the core data that's captured on each event, and then we can derive the usage reports from there. So with that, I promised a few slides, and that is all I will show. And where, one moment while I transition to, there we go. Carissa can use a computer. Transition to the collection manager. So all of you should have access to your library in the Palace Collection Manager. If you don't, please email support@thepalaceproject.org and we will get you set up with a login. And we have that email address on our slides, so don't feel like you have to memorize it. Today I'm going to be walking through our demonstration library, Main Street City. And so I've logged into the Main Street City Collection Manager. I've navigated to the dashboard here. And just a couple quick notes. To get to the new usage dashboard, you click on the View Usage link that's in the top right of the Usage and Reports box on the dashboard. Another thing we recently launched, along with the new usage dashboards, are inventory and holds reports, CSVs, that would be emailed to you. So if you have interest in looking at your inventory information as well as holds on collections, you can click the Request a Report button. I won't deep dive into those today, but I did want to point that out that that's available to you now as well. So to get into the new usage dashboard, you click on View Usage, and it will launch you into the tool that we're using to enable these new dashboards, and it is a tool from Amazon Web Services called QuickSight. So you'll see that listed here on the first tab. In this dashboard, I've tried to make the layout and kind of the navigation hopefully as straightforward as I can in Amazon QuickSight. It is a pretty robust tool, but also at the same time, it doesn't have a lot of UI bells and whistles, I would say. It's pretty plain vanilla in terms of the ability to make it to beautify the interface. So I've done what I can. to make it visually appealing. And I've laid out the navigation in tab structure so that my thinking there was that it wouldn't be, you wouldn't have all of these visuals kind of glommed onto one long page that you would have to scroll. Um, the first caveat that I want to throw out there is that these dashboard visualizations are all a work in progress. So the way that our engineering team has deployed these makes it easy for us to modify, Tara, Jill, and I to modify them without any kind of engineering intervention. And so we're going to take an iterative approach to updating these. We want your feedback. We want to make these dashboards useful for your needs. We've taken a stab at kind of this initial launch of the dashboard with information that we think and we've heard that you all need access to. But please, please, please don't hesitate to reach out with feedback. We'll have all of the different ways you can do that here on the slides at the end. But we want to hear your feedback about these dashboards and other visualizations that would be helpful for you. As I know you all have various reporting that you have to make externally. So please don't hesitate to reach out with feedback about these. Okay, so the first tab here just kind of welcomes you to the dashboard, reminds you regarding the navigation and the orientation. And then the first tab is the new patrons tab. So a few things about QuickSight specifically, and then I'll jump into this tab. Under each tab is the kind of controls, as Amazon QuickSight calls it, area, where you have some ability to modify the filters in the presentation of the data below. So by default, your library is always selected. I think many of you probably only have access to your individual library. So in all of these tabs, it'll automatically be selected. For stakeholders on the call who have access in the collection manager to multiple libraries or the entire state, you'll have the ability to either the default is selecting all of the libraries you have access to, but you can also narrow that down to one or multiple libraries in this dropdown. So the default is always your individual library. If you have access to more than one, it'll default to all of them, and you have the ability to filter from there. There are different time frames that default in all of these tabs. For the most part, it is year to date. I tried to streamline that with the exception of the current circulation tab, which is the last 2 weeks. But you do have the ability to adjust that on these tabs, the time frame. So if you're not interested in year to date and you want all time, you want last year, you want 2 years ago, you can adjust this time frame by selecting, just clicking in that drop down. And QuickSight gives you any number of options that you can then apply in terms of the time frame that you want to review this data. And as soon as you click something here, let me just do the last 10 years. So over time, since the beginning of time, how many patrons have logged into our Main Street City, which is our Lyrasis kind of staff library as well. We've had 154 new patrons, so this interface updated to match my time frame selected. To minimize this drop-down bar, you just kind of click anywhere in that dark gray controls area, so it'll expand and collapse it for you. And I've also tried to narrate some of these items around those control bars and the default time frame settings under each title for the tab here as well, just as a reminder. Again, because this interface isn't the most, I wouldn't say it's the most user-friendly in the world. One thing to note about all of this data is it's pulling from a database that is updated about midnight the night prior. So any new patrons, in this case for Main Street City Library, who have newly signed into Main Street City from midnight to 2 p.m. Eastern time, my time right now, won't be recorded in this data until tomorrow. So there is kind of like a batch load process that happens at around midnight every night. So just want to keep that in mind. It isn't exactly up to date specifically. Just monitoring the chat. Sorry, I got a little sidetracked. I want to make sure there weren't any questions there. Okay. The other thing I'll note here, then I'll move through each of the tabs, is that for each of these visualizations, even if it's just a report out on numbers, you have, if you hover over it, the ability within QuickSight to do a few different things. Some of these I actually haven't even played around with in much detail. So you can, of course, maximize not really exciting when you're just looking at a number, but super helpful when you're looking at complicated bar charts and lines. You can see the applied filters that I've placed on these by default. Um, Feel free to play around with any of these. You can delete them. You can totally muck things up, but it's not going to save or to blow away data or anything like that. You don't have to worry about um, modifying this interface in such a way that it would ever come back to kind of our main template or impact any of the other libraries. And if you do something, let's just like blow away all of these. For instance, you can delete all of these filters and really make this number go wild. Give me a moment. Let me just delete all of these. Um, we definitely have not had 6,394 patrons. So if you blow away these filters and you realize, oh, these numbers are terribly wrong, just click reload in your browser, and it'll go back to the default settings for the new patron number. So again, feel free to play around with these with these filters if you have interest. But if again you play around and you realize your data is now very wrong, just hit reload and it'll default back to the correct data. Finally, for each of these, you'll have the ability to either view the summary data that's comprising them, or you can export the data into a CSV. And there is an ability, the very last tab allows you to download all of the usage data as well. So we make that available for you.
Okay, you've got a question in the chat.
Thank you, Tara.
You're welcome.
If I'm getting stats for a consortium, is there a way to see the stats for each library individually at once, or do I have to choose each one individually? So great question, Kristen. Right now, you would have to select each one individually. The dashboard as it exists right now, I really made with an individual library in mind. And then the next phase of this work is building out a more consortial or a statewide view, so a multi-library view. And I haven't done that yet. So bear with me. That is on my list to develop for you so that you don't have to select each library individually in this interface. Great question. The other thing you might have noticed about this new patrons tab, and then I'll move on, is that there's really only one number displayed here, which is boring and not a great use of the landscape here. And the goal is to start to build out other patron information here as well. We are working right now, the engineers are working actively to develop the monthly active user number. In addition to the kind of total number of patrons who have ever logged into your library and the Palace app as well. So it's an area that we're hoping to flesh out with more data here in the future. So as we add more, we'll be sending out information and updates through our newsletter and through various other communication channels. So stay tuned for that. We're going to be expanding this, of course, now that we have this nice structure. And of course, as we hear feedback from you folks as well. But that is one thing we are actively working on right now, is to add that number here on the new patrons tab. All right, current circulation tab, as well as the historical circulation tab, are essentially duplicates of one another in terms of the data that's being presented. So you'll see the same boxes as well as the same visualizations in both tabs. The main difference is the time frame for which the data is being pulled from. So the current circulation tab doesn't really have a lot of ability to change anything. It is current circulation as of the last 2 weeks, as of today. So the last 2 weeks prior to today. And you can, if you have access to multiple libraries, you can select different libraries, but that's really all you can do on this tab. If you want to see circulation information for a specific time frame, that's when you would go to the historical circulation tab, and then you'll have the ability, and I'll show in just a minute how you can modify that. But then the boxes below that for each of these tabs are exactly the same. So in the last 2 weeks for Main Street City, we've had a total number of 25 checkouts and 1 hold placed. You can parse the checkouts by format, the holds by format, and then by license type, whether it was a licensed material or an open access title. The checkouts over time graph is a little boring when you're looking at just our relatively low usage library for the last 2 weeks. This will look a lot more interesting historically once we get to that graph. And again, for all of these charts, if you hover over in the top, you'll have a couple different options to change the filters or to view bigger or to download the data that's being used to generate these. And if you hover, probably as you can see as I'm kind of moving my mouse all over the place, all of the data points for the various days here are available if you hover over them as well. So on February 7th, we had 4 audio checkouts and one book. Let's see, if I scroll down here, we have a couple different tabular reports on checkouts by audience, by format, and then by license type, by audience, by format. And these, I added a little note. Audience, when we talk about that in our interface, is the audience of the metadata of the title that was selected, not the age of the person, like me, Carissa Egan, who checked out Pride and Prejudice. So just want to kind of discern that difference. In the bar charts to the right of the kind of the table display, you can see circulation by distributor. So we have content coming from the Palace Marketplace, as well as Palace Bookshelf, as well as something I can't see, Blackstone. I have to move my Zoom bar, sorry. And we've parsed that out by format as well. And again, if you hover over, you can see the data, the actual numbers for these bar charts. And again, this will be much more interesting when we look over a greater amount of time. And then finally below that, you can see top circulating ebooks and audiobooks for the past 2 weeks in Main Street City. And again, this will automatically update for your libraries. I see I've got some questions in the chat regarding the usage definitions. Is it only the initial checkout of a title on a patron account that counts as a checkout, or each time the patron downloads a copy on each device during their loan period? Great question, Melanie. So the checkouts are only the initial checkout that we're reporting on, not the subsequent fulfillments on that checkout. So all of the filters on all of these graphs are only that initial checkout that's being reported. So if I go over here, on any number of these, you'll see that the event type is always the Circ Manager checkout by default. So great question. Everyone is of Pride and Prejudice age. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more. And then another question, is there a way for you to add an information link to explain what each collection name means? Oh, good question, Melanie. Not off the top of my head, there isn't a way in QuickSight to do that because every state and every library has different collection names. So we'll have to think about a way to make that information much more straightforward. I see Tara taking a note. Thank you, Tara. I think that's something that we're going to have to explore a better way to do that for everyone. But that's a really great, a really excellent question. Keep those questions coming. Otherwise, I'll just drone on forever and ever. Okay, moving on to historical circulation. And let me get rid of this filters box. Again, it's the same exact boxes and visualizations. This time in the historical circulation in the controls area, I have added the time frame so that you can parse out this data over whichever time period is most of much interest to you. By default, again, is year to date. So the information below and QuickSight helpfully gives you what the actual dates are year to date. If you don't, like me, remember it's 2025. I'm actually going to change this. I want to see, let's go previous year. So what 2024 looked like. So we have a little bit more data. And you can see that these all of these boxes automatically updated when I checked that new or selected that new date or time frame. And yes, I believe I did answer Kristen's question. I'm working on a view for consortia and statewide folks, these charts and these visuals are really intended with an individual library kind of vantage point in mind. So I'm absolutely working on that and would love feedback. All right. The only thing that I'll say here in that historical circulation tab, again, as I showed, you can select any time frame or any time period, but it's the same exact visuals. This line chart checkouts over time looks a lot more interesting when you have a lot more data and a lot more time frame to look at. And one thing I'll just remind folks is that you can maximize these graphics by hovering over in the top right of any of these charts, and then you'll have the ability to make this much larger. For visualizations where you might need a slider or a scroll, you have the ability to do that. Down here at the bottom, it'll just kind of automatically appear for you. So you can go kind of like zero in on, let's see, I'm gonna zero in on August and September now. So you can have a lot of functionality there as well. You can minimize that.
You have another question in the chat.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Let's see. How does checkouts differ from licensed checkouts? So total checkouts is the entirety of everything in your collection. And then we break it out, the last kind of two boxes, license versus open access. They should, with any luck, I'm doing math in my head, they should add up to the total checkouts. So we're just parsing based on a licensed material that was checked out. So it's metered in some way versus the public domain open access stuff, primarily the Pellis bookshelf material typically resides in that open access bucket. So that would be the difference there. But these two boxes, the license checkout and open access, should sum up to your total checkouts figure. Hopefully that helps. If I need to clarify further, let me know. So then there's another question if we can tell you how many titles you have in the Pellis collection in total, audio and ebook. So there are a couple ways to answer that question that came in the chat. The first is that it's going to depend on your library. So the content that you have circulating in Pellis depends on how your library is configured. Many libraries use Pellis as a true aggregator. So they have content being circulated in Pellis that is integrated from their Overdrive collection, potentially from Baker and Taylor, from Biblioteca, if your library has a relationship with any of those vendors, or if you're part of a consortia that does. Some libraries are in a state where the state is sourcing some materials that are also integrated into Pellis. So that would be their Pellis collection. It would be an aggregate. And that's where, if I scroll down here, checkouts by distributor is really helpful because you can see content that's circulating in Pellis and kind of where it's coming from. Or yes, where it's sourced from and which titles your patrons are using within Pellis. If you are interested specifically in or asking specifically about the Pellis Marketplace, which is content that we have a mechanism where you can source content within Pellis called the Marketplace. That will also vary by library as well, if you're purchasing content from our marketplace or if your state is. So hopefully that answers your question, Christine. If it doesn't, let me know. And then there's a follow-up. How would we find the number out that is unique to us in terms of your Pellis collection in total? So if you're looking for inventory information, you can find that information by requesting the inventory report. And that's in the main Pellis Collection Manager dashboard here in the request a report. You can get an email to you that has the inventory information, so the number of titles that are in collections that are integrated. Really great question. This is a little tangential, but since we're on the topic, so this usage dashboard right now is really only talking about usage of your materials that have been integrated in Pellis. I do hope in the future to also start to create a dashboard that's similar to this, but around your inventory and your holds. So eventually you'll have a kind of comprehensive dashboard that's not just reporting on usage, but also going to show you the inventory of titles that are circulating in, that are not circulating, that are in Palace, and then holds on that material. But you can get to that information today by requesting that report. So more things to come as well as we continue to build this out. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. So again, the same tabular and bar charts are available. Tabular data, there we go. Finish my thought. And bar charts are here in the historical circulation, as well as the top circulating ebooks and audiobooks for last year, I believe is the time frame I selected for display. All right, I'm going to move on here and make sure we have enough time at the end for questions. In the next tab, the collection circulation details, again, you have the controls at the top. The default is, again, selecting your library and year to date. And again, you can select anything you want. Let's do previous year again, just because that's a little bit more comprehensive in terms of data. In this tab, what I was trying to think about is visualizations that relate to kind of the totality of your collection, so the titles that you've integrated into Palace, in kind of more holistically, is thinking about it as like the entirety of the collection. So again, as you folks start to use or look at this usage dashboard, please reach out with requests for other ways that this information can be sliced and diced and presented. Whether that's a bar chart, a line chart, there's a whole bunch of options within QuickSight. So I'm definitely eager to hear what you think in terms of what would be more helpful to see. But with that said, what is here on this collection circulation details tab is monthly circulation events. And again, this is based on the time parameter that you've selected. So this is the previous year. So I'll see by each month, I broke out by format, the number of holds and number of checkouts by format, and then the subtotal for each of those by month. And then if I scroll down to the very bottom, you'll see all of the months of the year and the subtotal for each of those here as well. You can also collapse that information. So if you just want the totals, you don't want to see the format, you can do that. Similarly, sorry, let me move you can't see my Zoom windows, but they're like blocking my boxes. So I have to like play musical box movement here on my screen. On the right-hand side, you'll see monthly checkouts and monthly holds, again, broken out by format. We heard from many libraries over the last several years that breaking out by format is pretty critical. So I tried to do that pretty kind of by default within our interface here. And then below that, you'll see a bunch of colored pie charts. The first is checkouts by distributor. And again, one example that I wanted to make is, let's say you're in California, for instance. The state library has very kindly sourced content from the Palace Marketplace, but you may also have a Palace Marketplace. You, individual library, may also have a Palace Marketplace collection. So all of those checkouts will be kind of lumped into the same piece of the pie when we look at the checkouts by distributor, but you can then also parse checkouts by collection name as well to kind of parse out your usage within Palace of your collection, your Palace Marketplace collection from the state library collection. These pie charts are a really great one to maximize so you can see kind of all the pieces of the pie. And again, if you hover, you'll see the actual count of events. You can click on any of these and get into more detail. The distributor key and the color key is over on the right-hand side. Let's see. I also included a pie chart, checkouts by audience, checkouts by collection source. So as I was just mentioning, if you're a library who has a statewide sourced marketplace or Baker and Taylor collection, but you also have your own individual collection, you'll be able to parse checkouts easily here by this bar chart. It will parse those into kind of two different charts, not collapse them together like the pie chart above. And then below that, I have checkouts by language, which is unfortunately pretty boring when we're looking at our staff library with not a lot of usage, primarily English. usage. And then finally, I have checkouts by genre, my favorite pie chart in the group because it's always the most colorful, and then a whole list of genres here on the side. Bear with me, I'm going to scroll up. And then the last kind of reporting tab and the most text-heavy tab in the list is looking at kind of the very kind of zoomed-in details of title circulation within Palace. So this has defaulted to previous year, and I have just essentially two main tabular displays. I have checkouts parsed by format and license type, and then holds by the same exact by title, by format, by license. So you can see, and there was an example that I wrote down here that I wanted to show. So Crying in H Mart, which was actually a DEI book club pick this past year within Lyrasis. We had 11 audio checkouts and 7 licensed ebook checkouts. Obviously, we don't have an open access version of that title, but this gives you hopefully a nice kind of deep dive into the titles that are circulating in Palace. Let me scroll back up to the top. If you click on checkout, you can sort. So if you want to see the most checked out audiobook title in Main Street City, in this case, or your library, you would just click descending, and then you can see the data below that. Similarly, let's see what it looks like for ebooks. So Octavia's Brood was the most frequently checked out ebook in the previous year within our Main Street City. And then I have the same exact data below here for holds. Of course, you won't see holds for open access titles because they're open to everybody, so there's not a holds list. But you can see the holds information as well. So much more kind of granular detail here. And I couldn't think of a better way other than a table to display that information. But if anybody has other ideas, I'm happy to hear them. And then finally, and then I'll turn it over for questions. I don't think I've seen any more in the chat. Is all of the usage data. So all of the events that I talked about when we just got started and all of the metadata for those events is captured and displayed here. I know in a web UI, this is not very helpful at all, but you have the ability, if I scroll over here, again, if you hover in the top right of this box, you have the ability to export this data into CSV or Excel, and it will export the data based on whatever the filters you've applied here at the top. So this would be year to date, all of the usage data for Main Street City Library. If, for instance, I wanted to see, let's do the previous year, and let's say I only wanted to see, I don't know, let's see, holds that were placed in the previous year. And maybe I just wanted to see holds that were placed for Palace Marketplace titles. That will apply those filters to this data. And then again, you can click to download in either CSV or Excel. So you can get the whole kit and caboodle of all of the data, or if you want to kind of pre-filter it before you download it, you can do that here in this interface as well. Of course, if you download all of the data, then you can apply filters in your spreadsheet, whatever software you use for spreadsheet manipulation, whether that's Excel, Google, whatever, you can apply filters there as well. So it's really whatever is the easiest for you, but that will give you all of the usage data that we're capturing. And this is truly like everything that we have in our database. Like I said, with the kind of one caveat that usage data that would have incurred from midnight last night to 2:45 p.m. today won't be loaded in our system and available in this reporting interface until tomorrow. So we're always off by kind of 12 to 24 hours, depending on kind of when you're looking at the data. All right. I think there is a question in the chat. Keep them coming. Can you please include the URL to your second tab in the chat where we can request a collection report for our libraries? Yes, Christine, that's available. in your library's collection manager. So depending on what library you're affiliated with, it'll be a little bit different for everybody. But we can, if you reach out to support, we can get that. We can get that for you. It's not the same for every library, unfortunately. Yeah, absolutely. Happy to help. So that is the extent of the live remarks that I had. The only thing I wanted to point out in the remaining slides that I had, the one slide in total, is just a link to resources. So we have our library resources page on our PALAS website. We have documentation for the collection manager dashboard, as well as this new usage dashboard in Amazon QuickSight. That's all available here at the documentation link that's on our public wiki. We have 2 ways that you can submit feedback. Well, 3 actually. So we have a feedback board where you can submit feedback and requests for new features, updated functionality regarding anything related to PALAS, not just this usage dashboard. Alternatively, you can email us at support@thepalasproject.org, or you can contact any of us individually. So I put all of our emails on the slide as well. So whatever mechanism is most fitting and most comfortable for you to reach out, please do that. And then Susan asked, could one of the time period settings be for fiscal year rather than having to set the dates ourselves? I don't know how many people are on a July to June fiscal year, but we are. That's a great question. I am not sure. I'm going to say probably I don't have the ability to change the kind of structural date dropdown. I think that's hard coded in Amazon QuickSight. I will look, Susan. That's a great idea. Hold on, I'm going to jot this down old school style with pen and paper because that's how I commit it to my brain. I can't imagine I'm going to have a lot of ability there within Amazon QuickSight to make that change. But if I do, I will try to add that as a parameter that you can more quickly select from. And I assume you would probably want current fiscal and previous fiscal as kind of your 2 most selected options. But okay, yes, perfect. Okay, so current fiscal and previous fiscal.
I think for now you would just need to set the absolute date range instead of using one of these presets, right?
That's correct. Yep. So if I click down here, absolute date range, yes, it's a little funky, but let's just do, well, let's do our current fiscal year, which is July 1 to watch me click in my brain. The July to June fiscal year is like my brain. My brain has such a hard time computing that for some reason. But here we go. Here's our current fiscal year. Yes, I can see how that would be annoying. I'll do my best to see if that's something that I have the ability to do for you folks. Add that as an option there. That was the extent of my slides and of kind of the pre-prepared remarks and kind of deep dive I have, but I would love to hear in our last kind of 15 minutes, and I have the ability to stay over. I just want to be respectful of time. I'd love to hear thoughts, feedback, questions as folks have them. Feel free to put them in the chat, or if you're comfortable, feel free to kind of raise your hand and come off mute and voice your question to us as well if you're comfortable. Happy to do that. Jeff asked, what does other mean in terms of genre? That's a great question. I don't honestly know. It would be whatever the publisher/distributor is sending us. So if they put other in the genre, that's what we're reporting on. To the best of my knowledge, PALAS, the software itself, isn't doing any metadata manipulation. So we're kind of just spitting out specifically what comes to us from the upstream distributor, who ultimately get their metadata from the publisher. So really great question. I don't, it would be whatever, whatever the publisher has sent the distributor. Don't have a better answer for you than that, Jeff, sorry. Other questions that folks have, or feedback, or just overall thoughts? Didn't actually see how many. We've got 44 folks on the line. I mean, I will fill time if people don't have questions. Okay,
Wanna
another
say
question.
Thank you. Y'all have been, I was kind of figuring this out when you launched it, but you've clarified a few things for me, especially with the filters. So I really appreciate that. And I know that I'd already kind of been hitting y'all up with some things going, where did this go? What happened to this? And so thank y'all very much. You've been very responsive.
Melody, well, thank you. And again, I mean, I'm very, very open and honest when I say, please, 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 please send us your feedback. I am not a visual person. Like, give me a spreadsheet any day, all day, every day, every day. I'll take a spreadsheet. So translating data into visuals is not my strong suit. But I can't imagine that there's not any number of you on the call who think more visually. So if you're staring at this data and you think, oh, Carissa, a Venn diagram would be awesome for XYZ, like please, please don't hesitate to reach out and give us that suggestion. Because I want to tailor this kind of data presentation to what you all need on a day-to-day basis, because I know you're the ones who are in the hot seat for reporting internally, externally, to all of the stakeholders, to state, to whoever. So to the extent I can, I want to make it as easy as possible. I see a question on the all usage data. Can we get a number dash count? I need to export to see what the total is. Total of what? Of like the number of rows or total number of like checkouts? Let me know what
Yeah,
you're thinking
so
there.
generally what I'm looking for is every month I need to know how many audiobooks that checked out through Palace that were not original checkouts. And so when I get all that set up, I'm really just looking for a number. So in order to get that, I export the sheet and then see how many lines are in the sheet. But if I could just get a number to appear, it'd be really great.
Say the first part again, Sandra, because you were breaking up for me. So you need a total number of Palace checkouts that were for just, and that's where it broke up.
Yeah, it's usually just Palace content in a certain format, and I just need to know how many, anything excluding Overdrive, because we count that in the first one.
Okay. You need essentially, so my thinking for this all usage data was just like it was an export of all usage data. But what you'd like, what I'm hearing, is an export of kind of the summary for the month.
Right. I need just the number and I'm on my way.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking, I might have some opportunity here in this historical circulation if I did just the month, the previous month. Let me noodle around with that. I might be able to add like a quick download here or in one of the other tabs if it makes more sense. So you want essentially a exclusive. Writing this down. Hold on, everybody. You get to watch me like write and think at the same time. How invigorating. Checkouts by format. Got it. All right. Let me make sure I didn't go chronologically. The structure of the tabs, tables, and graphs is very helpful. Thank you. I appreciate that today is easier to understand these formats. Oh, thank you, Gretchen. I appreciate that. That's what I was hoping to do with the tabular structure, but you know, data is one of those things where it's like, this is how my mind wraps its head around data, but any and all feedback would be helpful because yeah, everybody thinks about and processes data differently. And then there's a question on the circulations by distributor visualization, circ by distributor. So let me get to that. Circ by distributor. Yep. It would be helpful to have a total for ebook, audiobook combined by distributor. Well, I can add the two columns. Oh, I see. Yes, absolutely. You don't want it parsed by format, so you just want to see the combined total. Yeah. I think I should be able to add that. Right. So just a third bar that has total Palace Marketplace, and then you can parse out. Oh yeah, I think sorry. thinking on the fly, another way to visualize this would just be one bar and then you'd have like two different color blocks. Yes, I think I can absolutely make that change. Heather, I think that's a great suggestion to how to modify that to get the same amount of data, but make it easier for you all. Okay, suggestion number 3, writing it down. Checkouts by distributor. This needs to be a combined bar chart. All right. Other suggestions, questions? Yes, so no problem, Melissa. The question is, what does the event type circulation manager fulfill mean? So excellent question. So in Palace, when a patron or customer user, whichever term you use, clicks get, that's a circulation manager checkout, and we only record it the first and only time a person checks out a title. Circulation manager fulfill is when that button turns to download in the app. And a patron may fulfill or download a title potentially multiple times, depending on how many devices they're using Palace on. They'll only check it out once, but as they open up Palace on their iPad, on their iPhone, on their Android device, we will record multiple fulfill events for that same checkout. So that's what fulfill means. It's essentially a download. And then every time they open a book, you would imagine there could be very many more open book events as there are fulfill, as there are checkouts. So we're kind of getting more granular in terms of the events that we're tracking. So hopefully that makes sense. Let me know if it doesn't, and I'll clarify further. And then another question, I'm pretty sure you mentioned this was in the pipeline for a future update, but eventually there will be a total lifetime registered patrons available in addition to new patrons, correct? So that's a good question, Amanda, and it might not be clear. So that actually is this number in the kind of new patrons tab. It is, but depending on what time frame you select here. So if I go up, this is just year to date, but if I go last 10 years, which exceeds when Palace existed, that is the total number of lifetime users that have ever registered to use Main Street City. So we do have that number available today. What we don't have is a monthly active user. So we don't know out of that number, 154, how many of those have been active in Palace within the last month for Main Street City. So that's another critical element that we're working to add here. Because as you might imagine, the total lifetime registered patrons number is just going to continue to increase, but you also want to know kind of what subset of that number is actively continuing to use Palace like today. So we're working on a monthly active user number for you. I could see how that kind of new patrons, like the terminology that I've used might be misleading. So if anybody has a suggestion on a more accurate description for that number, because it can, depending on what time frame you select, it could be new patrons within the last month, those who have newly signed on to Palace. But if you select the last 10 years, it's like the totality of all registered patrons. So that's a little, the naming of these tabs wasn't easy, and I'm not a super creative person either. Surprise, surprise. So making sure that they were accurate and succinct and comprehensive for all of the things that you could do within was a little bit tricky. So if folks have questions or suggestions on that, happy to hear them. Other comments or questions? We have about 4 minutes left. If there isn't anything, then you're very welcome, everyone. I hope this was useful. Oh, there's a question. So choosing the previous month date range won't give you the new patrons that registered. Yes, if you choose, well, let me click absolute date range here and select. Oh, whoa, how do we went back to 2016. That's interesting. Let's just do 1/1/2025 and wait 1 second while I type here. So when I select an absolute date range and I select just January, that will give you the number of patrons who have newly signed on to Main Street City in the month of January 2025. So apologies if I confused the situation. That will give you just the number of users who have registered newly in January. All right, I don't think I see any other questions unless I missed them. Again, thank you all for your time. I know you're all super busy, so I appreciate you taking an hour out of your day to sit and chat about data. Not the most exciting thing ever, but again, I appreciate you taking time. We will send the PDF of the presentation with the links and the email addresses in there, a link to the YouTube recording. And please, 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 please don't be a stranger. Please send us all of your suggestions and ideas you have for this. And as I mentioned, we're actively working on adding monthly active user reporting, as well as transitioning inventory and those hold reports, which are right now tabular CSV, Excel spreadsheet data, into a visualization functionality just like this as well. So something we're actively working on. Hopefully in this next year we'll make it available, because I know we've heard that from libraries loud and clear. So we are working on it. This has been a long time coming for those of you on the call who have been with us for many years and have heard about this dashboard for all of those years. We thank you so much for your patience and sticking with us. I think we're finally here. We're excited to be able to share this data with you, and just appreciate your patience with us along the way. You're a great bunch of folks, and I think speaking for Jill and Tara, we are honored to be able to work with you. So thanks everybody, stay well, and we will catch you on the next webinar. Take care, everybody.